Yeah, it's just snow. I mean, it's just ceaseless soft snow. This is day three, and I'm I'm trapped. It just keeps building and building. So it's I've been doing some writing and some reading, but I just can't seem to get out of here. So I hope you're somewhere better.
Oh, gosh, that sounds kind of hypnotic and frightening, and it's just very different from where I am. It's about, oh, it's mid 60s, and it's fairly fair, I should say. I'm in Georgia. I'm almost. I think I'm thinking of it as like almost to Florida for some reason in my mind. Yeah, it's been an interesting trip. I came to this area to check out this smaller town. Not sure if I'm comfortable saying the name of it due to circumstances tonight. There's been this kind of tradition adopted where the stories about how and when this got started are quite varied. But well, this area is often sort of thought about as being somewhat mysterious. As far as there seems to be a lot of uh, talk of UFO sightings and underground tunnels and strange noises. Apparently, radio waves behave differently. There's any number of different tales, but so it's already kind of got an off kilter reputation. But there is this practice of around the town and kind of out in some of the other community, kind of throughout the county, but concentrated in this town. People will find little clues written down on pieces of paper, little notes, and it's just kind of it adds sort of an air of mystery. It can be charming and also a little unnerving, depending on what kind of clues you're finding. And no one really no it's not no one knows to what clues to what. You get the feeling that people are just kind of doing their best to quietly kind of keep this lure moving and going forward, because it's kind of it's something else that makes this place unique. And there was something that had started to happen a few years ago, and is still going on. There were these forums where people were sharing the clues and the messages they were finding, and there's a fence where you can go and put notes up that you have found, and they're all sort of convincingly folded. And I mean, I'm sure I'm sure some people are just kind of randomly putting them up to extend the this ongoing text. Now, as any modern city does, even small towns, there are more and more occasions and kind of opportunities for surveillance. Like there's, of course, cell phones, there's more cameras being placed here and there, like along roads and, over parking lots, security cameras, that kind of thing. And sometimes people would look at their footage, like at work or at home, if they have like a doorbell camera. People would sometimes glance at their footage just to see if they could maybe spot some of this this clandestine clue leaving activity. And, like when are people doing this? What times of day are they doing are they doing this? There'll be all sorts of places like tucked behind, benches or loose stones, or like wrapped around, bus stop poles, or even like in a playground, just kind of anywhere. So you're always sort of on the lookout. After a while, it became obvious that there was a person that was doing this, that was being predominantly spotted. Actually, I say predominantly, it was always the same person when people started comparing, or it appeared to be, as closely as anyone could tell. Sometimes they were just walking, but just glancing around probably for a spot to hide something. But sometimes they would just like stand there in the frame and just still and just look at the camera, just like stare right at where the camera is. And then sometimes they would only appear, they wouldn't appear in the shot itself, but they would appear in reflective surfaces. Like if, depending on the time of day, sometimes, a camera would be aiming at a street, but it would catch a shop window, an antique shop with a mirror in the window, something like that. And you could see this person, this figure in the mirror, but nowhere else. It was impossible to detect what was causing this effect, or where, how this trick could be accomplished, if it was a trick at all, if it, what was going on. Also, just other mirror-like surfaces, like sometimes just reflected in the windows of businesses, or, just something shiny. It's just very, I don't quite, that's sort of that's where it's at. I don't quite know what to make of it. I'm talking to people and I'm looking at footage myself, and I've got some notes that people have given me or have sent to me. I have a few here. One of them says, "Look in the sky tonight." This other one says, "Ever wonder why there's no fourth floor at the bank? You have to count the streetlights. I've loved you for a long time." Or now it seems to get a little dark, these last two. "Look behind you. And do you hear it now?" There's one group in particular out here in this area who they live on this farm. I'm actually very near them. I'm just down the road, and they seemingly built kind of a mirrored structure of some sort, or a shrine, and they keep kind of adding to it and extending it out and adding more and more mirrors. And apparently they think that somehow this will be the key to understanding something about the forces of the universe out here, or discovering something, or communicating something, I suppose. Anyhow, it's there seems to be a lot of activity going on over there. At night, you can see these flashes of light in the sky, and you can hear them singing. It should be enough to start a story. But of course, it can't be just that. There has to be more. And there is more. We'll get to it. Everything leads to the same place. It comes back around. He'd started having a strange relationship with a mirror. With mirrors, really. All of them. They were as different from each other as people, he thought. As the people in them. As what was seen. It seemed to him that no one ever talked about it. About the difference. And he wondered why. He stood in his yard at night, and the wind soured through the neighbors' willows, and the worms crawled in the thatch grass, and the trash along the streets was pulled down and dragged by rodents back to the swamp. He thought about them, about mirrors, and how they are supposed to double things, to multiply them, to make those things the same. He guessed that mirrors did that, or he guessed they sometimes did. But here was the problem, he thought, or one of them, one of the gaps. Nothing reflected is the same. It isn't even reversed really back on itself. It's not the same at all, in any mirror or surface, in any heart. He was trying to figure something out, but he didn't know what. What was there here to figure out? His housemates were soft-footed in the night and left mild traces of their mouths in the sink. The sweeping and the plates, mostly, were done. He worked hard enough, but not too much. He rallied contentedly around the fridge, the card table rug. But he was a human, and this was his time for reflection. A time like other times, which looked so distinct and the same. And something had happened. He was so frightened by it he could hardly breathe. He was using his camera one morning. It was the weekend and nobody stirred and it was quiet and he liked the light. It was somehow more yellow and white and blue than he had ever seen. He was angling, experimenting, using a full-length mirror leaned shakily back against the blinds. He was trying to find things out, about himself, about the world, about the tiny beat of his health and its place and insignificance to the wider field. And he looked after, and you may have guessed it by now, it seems so cheap, there was something behind him. It was curled and staring. It was awake and watching and shiny and sick. But it wasn't looking at him. It was looking at the mirror. It was bold and looking right in. It might have been there all night. There was a story went like this. If you wish to enter here, you'll need to clear your mind.
I had one very, very disturbing experience involving mirrors once. I'll tell that a little bit later. I have to kind of get my thoughts together about that. But I did want to mention one other thing that occurs to me. Years ago, I was helping someone with their doctoral thesis. We interviewed several serial killers about very specific topics, imprisoned serial killers. There was a man named Ed Billiardolin. He was a serial killer in custody serving multiple life sentences in Baton Rouge. We had him into this extensive questionnaire. One of the questions was, list some things that you are afraid of. And one of the things on his otherwise predictable list, he simply wrote the phrase, weird mirrors. And we asked him about this. And so it turned out that Ed Billiardolin had this a genuine terror of seeing himself reflected in any mirror of an extremely unusual shape. And the way he described it, I think the basis of his fear was that certain shapes of mirrors or even multiple mirrors on a wall, they appeared to be sort of cutting his body in many pieces because some of his body was not there. For instance, if a mirror was like in a strange S shape, some sort of artistic shards kind of thing, they sort of bifurcated his body in ways that absolutely terrified him. And he was afraid to approach these mirrors. It wasn't often that you see such a thing. It really is not. Outside of some more adventurous architecture and buildings and so forth, maybe an art museum or something, or an artistic display. But he was genuinely horrified by that. And I can almost understand that, to see oneself in a mirror, but instead of the clean whole image of yourself being presented, it's slashed. Parts of you are missing. And, I've always remembered that. Ed Billiardolin.
That is that's fascinating. I I've been trying to think of how to even put this. I This whole subject has just been confusing to me. It just is. It seems so. I can't, I haven't been sleeping. I don't know quite what it's been doing to my mind. It seems to be, on the at the outset, it seems like a simple idea, a simple subject, a simple object, a mirror, a thing that should be threatening. It's this one dimensional thing, but it is not. It is not. I can't quite get to the bottom of. Well, for instance, another thing about this town that's so unusual is that there have apparently been, I can't tell you the exact number, but many more cases of twins being born here in this part of the state than in other areas of kind of comparable population anywhere in the world, really. And and when I say twins, I don't mean just twins, but a particular kind of twin, the mirror twin or mirror image twins. And this is where twins in which their features appear asymmetrically or like on opposite sides. So when they look at each other, it's like they're looking in a mirror. And just that idea, I can't stop turning around because it's like it's supposed to be showing you what is the most familiar thing to yourself. But in reality, it's actually not showing you, it's showing you the opposite of the familiar or the reverse of the familiar. It's backwards, just on that one level, at least how you sit in your own consciousness. It's like they seem to be, it's like the mirror is a riddle and an answer to the riddle. It is all the possibilities or no possibilities, It's infinity or it's just this flat tool, this one-planed tool. I think of that. Do you remember the story? Something about the dog. There's different versions I know, but like there's a dog with a walking over a bridge with a bone in its mouth, and it looks down into the water and sees its reflection, and it gets envy for it wants the bone that the dog in the water has in its mouth. So in order to reach out and get it, the dog drops its bone, and then
Yeah.
and it loses both bones. So there's this very popular, storied and very effective use of this idea of the mirror as being as making an appearance in any kind of number of morality tales throughout any kind of faith. Self-obsession being one of the most, as we know, deplorable character traits. It's the whole, you look into the abyss and the abyss looks back, right? I don't, it just seems like a mirror and a mirror images can reflect and reflect and reflect and just infinitely present to you whatever you are most prepared or unprepared and shocked to see.
Yeah, the old interior decorators trick of if you have big mirrors on the wall in, say, your living room, well, it makes the room look bigger. I remember initially thinking, well, come on, who's being psychologically fooled by that? But you know what? It works. The sense that you are in a much more open space, even though you're just seeing a reflection of what where you're standing. It's true, and your reality is a little bit expanded, and it's nothing more than a piece of glass with a solid backing that's creating this illusion. And I think if you were to live in a house that had a living room like that for 20 years, you would still have that vague perception that you're in more of an open space. creating its own little false universe. Every time I want to laugh, when I hear that interior decorator's tip, I have to remind myself that, well, life and perception is far stranger than we really think.
Yeah, there's this strange bar where I grew up. It's well, first of all, it's quite dark. It's dark inside, and especially you notice it if it's like the light of the late afternoon, and you walk into the interior and you really can't see for a few seconds. You have to let your eyes adjust. And so, not only is it very dark, but there are also a lot of mirrors placed around the environs. And they don't, you don't notice them right away, but they really are kind of everywhere once you start to look, at least over the top part of the wall. And anyway, what this does, coupled with the kind of enclosed space, is it makes me completely unclear of its dimensions. I could not tell you where it starts and where it stops. It's not that it necessarily is so sophisticated that it looks infinite or anything, but I really don't know where it starts and stops, and I have to. I mean, I guess it works in this immersion kind of way. You feel like you're sort of on an island or on Mars, or and so of course, why not buy another expensive drink? But I was attending, yes, the karaoke. The nightly karaoke there once, and it was sort of lovely. Um, there was it was my first time, and I didn't really know what to expect. And so, a little, maybe about 30 minutes or so into the festivities, there was this young man who had, he was very decadently dressed. He had like a feather boa, and I think some platforms, and he had just one of the sections of mirror back there was a very 70s, very there is a section where it's ceiling to floor, and it's got those little I don't know what the term for them is. They're probably, where it appears that it's kind of a stone, or like slightly cracked. There's these painted sort of kind of a lacy pattern throughout the mirror. And he was just kind of standing there at the mirror and just kind of dancing like with himself. Nothing very forceful, nothing very indulgent, but just kind of a nice, like he had met some kind of a friendly, just like a friendly dance partner, some cultured company for the evening, and they were just having a little dance. It's a strange place, and it can also be quite wondrous.
The doctor opened her doors in the new year, early January. Snow and ice still bit the road. Branches of trees still lace. She spent a few lonely days moving things, placing them. There was something that flourished in the evening here. In the low part away from town, the sunk suburb grass, fat, mean geese bleating in their fiberglass ponds. She could hear it traveling by, some repetition, some tune. Her 10 o'clock showed up flushed with hurry and thin steam. She led him to the room with the mirrors. "Stand just there," she instructed. She positioned a basket of glass behind him to show him the other ways he might appear to the world, in the angles he ignored. He hated looking, and this was what he needed. For empathy, for pain. He left her office scraped and gulping on sheer muscle. His breath was bulky, ungraceful. Gone. Her noon arrived and looked around the space, hard. She sniffed the air, wrinkling her nose. But she was self-conscious about wrinkling her nose. And so then what became more important than any substandard thing she caught was the concealment of her detection of the substandard thing, and so on and on. She put off a jewel box perfume. The therapist arranged the mirror room according. This client confronted a view from above. She could see the top of her head, how small and clumsy she was, how like a thing. Because her problem was, she thought both that she was God and that she wasn't God, but longed to be at the same time. It had ruined her friends. She left without scheduling, throwing promises back in a gauzy train. The 3 o'clock was stuck in between worlds. She talked back and forth, unsure where to land. She ran her palms along the side seams of her pants and over the round bones in her knees. I don't know if I'm big, small, or just right, she said. I'm confused all the time. When she went to the room with the mirrors, there was only one, a large one facing flat. Can you stay with me a minute? She asked the therapist. They stood, waited. This client left the office looking at her feet. But the first thing that happened, the first that day, and the thing which the therapist tried all day to compress, a man came in. It was just after 9. He was weird and light, with a stone-gray coat sitting stiffly on his arms. His eyes were big and bleached and black, and when he spoke, the vibration seemed all wrong, seemed carried, lugged from place to place. He was humanly groomed, but her skin raised. Where had he come from? The grain? A howling ditch? I walk by here sometimes. I think sometimes that I need to do that. I think I do. What's that? She asked carefully. Reflect, like your sign says. Reflect, examine. He straightened to a wooden stake shape. But I'm often scared to, you see. Well, she said, we all are. He nodded desperately. I suppose, he said. Did you... Sorry. I'll leave now. He faced her, placing his hands over his stomach. He was pale and wore no rings. I came to warn you. You won't like it here. You won't. You can't open these doors. You'll get cut. She stared at him. You'll bleed out and die. Get out of here, she said. I'll call the police. I will, yes. Thank you. He ran out through white cement. She straightened the calendar by the phone. It, like everything else in here, needed a shine.
I think I fully remembered now the thing I wanted to say, the thing that happened to me. Are you familiar with the Delisio House in Capaci, Italy? Have you heard of that? Do you know the story there?
No.
This was one of the more interesting alleged haunted houses that I've ever had anything to do with. I came along kind of late in the game, research-wise, but I did want to see it, and I did get the opportunity to spend the night there once. The Delisio House had one famous aspect, which was that some people who stayed in the house, passed through. I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember exactly how this started. But looking within the pipes of this otherwise completely normal 3-story brownstone on a very quiet street, if you were to look within the pipes, some people would see a slight glowing, and then they could see tiny living dioramas of little tiny humans living their lives. And people would report that what they were seeing was actually the Delisio family, the original Delisio family who built the house about 150 years ago. They met with a tragic end, but some people said that they could see in the interior of the pipes in the house. They could see these little dioramas just briefly, 5-10 seconds at a time, and then they would wink out of existence. This was the entirety of the alleged haunting, and I had never encountered anything like this before. So I finally got permission to stay the night there alone. And like the vast majority of people who spent any time in the Delisio house, I heard nothing. I saw nothing. I encountered nothing. I looked within the pipes at all of the identified angles and locations that people in the past had very occasionally seen these strange images inexplicably. I didn't see anything. So I chalked it up to another in a long line of disappointments, really. But I woke up in the middle of the night alone in one of the upstairs bedrooms where two of the children burned to death. I got up. I wasn't sure why I woke up, and I went into the bathroom, and I stood in front of the mirror, and I turned on the light. And almost immediately, I found myself sort of hypnotized by my own reflection, just staring at myself. Something was odd, something was unusual. I didn't quite look like myself. And then, little by little, I became smaller and smaller in that mirror. My image seemed to be shrinking, even though the background, everything behind me, the bathroom, remained the same size. I physically seemed to be getting smaller. Second by second, over the course of, I would say, a minute, my head, my shoulders, my entire body, I was shrinking as I stared at myself in the mirror. And I was becoming tinier and tinier until I was just a little tiny thing that might have fit inside one of the pipes of the Delisio house. And I looked at myself, this tiny inch-high thing in the mirror, and then I vanished. I was looking into a mirror, I was seeing the bathroom, and I wasn't there. In this hypnotic state, I must have collapsed to the floor, because I woke up the next morning right there on the bathroom floor with only the vaguest memory of what had happened to me. It took a couple of days for it all to come back.
From the mixed up lines of Grimm's fairy tales, number 53, Little Snow White. Once upon a time in midwinter, when the snowflakes were falling like feathers from heaven, a queen sat sewing at her window, which had a frame of black ebony wood. During the day, the girl was alone. Fortunately, it was almost evening. Then she began to run. She ran over sharp stones and through thorns, and wild animals jumped at her, but they did her no harm. Just then, a young boar came running by. "I love you more than anything else in the world, but anyone who might eat a little piece of it would die. Are you afraid of poison?" She barely had a bite in her mouth when she fell to the ground dead. "Come with me to my father's castle." Their wedding was planned with great splendor and majesty. 2. After dark, the masters of the house returned home. Every morning they went into the mountains looking for ore and gold, and in the evening when they came back home, their meal had to be ready. "Who's been sticking with my fork? Who's been cutting with my knife? Who has been eating from my plate?" They lifted her up and looked for something poisonous. They undid her laces. They combed her hair. Then they put a pair of iron shoes into burning coals, but nothing helped. She was dead. She was not breathing at all. "If you will keep house for us, and cook, make beds, wash, sew, and knit, and keep everything clean and orderly, then you can stay with us, and you shall have everything you want." Not long afterward, she opened her eyes, lifted the lid from her coffin, and was alive again. "Yes, with all my heart." 3. They washed her with water and wine. She was forced to step into the red-hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead. Then they put the coffin outside on a mountain, and one of them always stayed with it and watched over her. The child liked it so much that she let herself be deceived, and she opened the door. "She will soon know that you are here. Do not let anyone in." "How did you find your way to our house?" 3 drops of blood fell into the snow. 4. "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." He thought, "The wild animals will soon devour you anyway." But still, it was as if a stone had fallen from his heart, for he would not have to kill her. She had a magic mirror. A year later, the king took himself another wife. "I never want to see her again. Kill her, and as proof that she is dead, bring her lungs and her liver back to me." The poor child was now all alone in the great forest, and was so afraid that she just looked at all the leaves on the trees and did not know what to do. 5. A year later, the king took himself another wife. At first, she did not want to go to the wedding, but she found no peace. They were going to bury her, but she still looked as fresh as a living person, and still had her beautiful red cheeks. At last, she thought of something. Knocking on the door, she called out, "Beautiful wares for sale, for sale." Then she was satisfied, for she knew that the mirror spoke the truth. Then her envious heart was at rest, as well as an envious heart can be at rest. "This time," she said, "I shall think of something that will destroy you." 6. The wicked woman uttered a curse, and she became so frightened, that she did not know what to do. "Let me have the coffin. I will give you anything you want for it." Then, with the art of witchcraft, which she understood, she made a poisoned comb. "You specimen of beauty," said the wicked woman, "now you are finished." She remained lying in it, entrusted herself to God, and fell asleep. 7. The envy and pride grew ever greater, like a weed in her heart, until she had no peace day and night. "Take care and let no one in when we are not with you." Once again, they warned her to be on guard and not to open the door for anyone. Just then, a young boar came running by. "Go on your way. I'm not allowed to let anyone in." And she walked away. As soon as the child was born, the queen died. The dear child was now dead, and she remained dead. They said, "We cannot bury her in the black earth." And they had a transparent coffin made so she could be seen from all sides. All 7 sat next to her and mourned for her and cried for 3 days. "We will not sell it for all the gold in the world." 8. She ran as far as her feet could carry her, and just as evening was about to fall, she saw a little house and went inside in order to rest. Against the wall there were 7 little beds, all standing in a row and covered with snow-white sheets. After dark, the masters of the house returned home. "Good day, dear woman. What do you have for sale?" And she took out one that was braided from colorful silk. "Would you like this one?" Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who in this land is fairest of all?